Chapter 1. I arrive in Lilliput, myself and my family. I decide to travel. Disaster at sea. Lilliput. My name is Lemuel Gulliver, and this is my story. My father came from the north of England, and I was his middle son. I had 2 older brothers and 2 younger brothers. We didn't have much money, but my father sent me to Cambridge University. I was 14 years old. I was very lucky. I studied hard, but after 3 years, it was time for me to start work. I went to London to work for a famous doctor. In my free time, I studied more. I studied navigation, mathematics, and medicine. Why? Because I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to travel. I finished my studies and I found a job as a doctor on a ship called the Swallow. I travelled for 3.5 years with the Swallow. After these 3.5 years, I was tired, so I decided to stay in London. I found a small house and I found some patients. I found a wife. Her name was Mary and she had £400. But life was difficult on dry land. I was a good doctor, but I was too honest. The rich doctors in London weren't very honest. They made a lot of money from their patients. The patients bought a lot of medicines from them. I didn't want to be like them. I had no choice. I had to go back to sea. For the next 6 years, I travelled to the East and West Indies. I made a lot of money. On the ship, I spent my free time reading. On dry land, I watched new people and learned new languages. I had enough money to stay at home with my wife and family. I stayed in London with them, and I was happy. But 3 years later, I had money problems again. I looked for another ship and found the Antelope. Captain William Pritchard gave me a job. I was a ship's doctor again. The Antelope left from Bristol on May 4th, 1699. Our destination was the South Seas. The journey went well until we met a terrible storm. The strong wind was very dangerous. We went up and down and left and right. 12 men died in the storm. Suddenly the ship hit rocks near Van Diemen's Land. Disaster! The ship broke in 2. 6 of us jumped into a small boat. We tried to move away from the ship, but it was hard. We were near land when the wind hit our small boat. Suddenly, I was in the water. I never saw my 5 friends again. I swam and swam for hours and hours until I was so tired that I couldn't swim. I'll die here, I thought. But what was this? Suddenly, I could feel land under my feet. I felt stronger now. Now I could walk. I had to walk for a long time before I arrived at the shore. It wasn't very windy now and I could see the sun. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening. I walked along the beach, looking for houses or some people. I was tired and it was very hot. It was November 5th, I think. But that was summer in the South Seas. I decided to sit down. Then I lay down. The sand was warm and soft. I went to sleep. I slept for hours. I think about 9 hours. When I woke up, it was light. I decided to get up and look for help. I couldn't move my legs. I tried to move my arms, but I couldn't. I tried to move my head, but I couldn't. Then I understood why. Ropes. Thousands of little ropes were over my legs and my arms. The ropes were everywhere, even in my hair. The sun was very hot, and its light hurt my eyes. Then something moved on my leg. It moved across my body until I could see it. It was a little man, about 6 inches tall. Now I could feel another 40 little men walking all over me. I shouted. They ran away. They were afraid. But so was I. They soon came back. One of them came up to my face again and shouted, "Hekina degul." His friends repeated the words. I didn't understand their language. I tried to move. I broke the little ropes on my left arm and tried to catch one of the little men. They ran away again, and then I heard a shout, "Tolgo Fanak." Suddenly, I felt a terrible pain in my left hand. They're throwing arrows, I thought. Some arrows went into my hand, some into my body. I tried to free my hair. More terrible pain. Then the arrows stopped, so I tried to free my right arm. The arrows started again. I must stay still, I thought. I can wait until night. These people are too small to keep me here. I was right. The arrows stopped again. Now I could hear a lot of noise. There were more little men. What are they doing? I thought. They're building something. Again I was right. Now I could see a platform made of wood. The platform was near my head on the right. After an hour they stopped building. Some of the little men cut the hair on my left so I could move my head. I looked to the right. I could see 4 of the little men on the platform. They want to talk to me, I thought. One of the men was older and taller than the others. He started to speak, but I couldn't understand. Now I was quite hungry. I put my fingers on my mouth. The man understood. A few minutes later, I felt hundreds of the little men on my body. They had food for me. They put some in my mouth. I ate and ate. Then they brought something delicious to drink. I drank and drank. The little men were so happy that they danced on my body. "Hekina de Ghoul," they shouted. Then a very important man arrived. He had a letter from the emperor. I understood from his hands that the emperor wanted to see me. I had to go to the capital city. I also understood that I wasn't free. Suddenly I felt tired. Why? Sleeping medicine in the wine, they told me later. I slept for about 8 hours. When I woke up, I was in a strange cart on the way to the capital. It took 500 engineers, 900 strong men, and 1,500 horses to take me there. They were very clever people. We arrived at the capital 2 days later. The emperor was there to meet me. "This is your new home," he said. He pointed to an old church. Some of the men put new ropes on my legs, but now I could walk a little. The next morning, the emperor came to see me again with his family. With him were carts of food and drink. The emperor was taller than all his countrymen, and his face was strong. He was about 28 years old. He spoke to me, but I couldn't understand. I tried English, Dutch, Latin, French, Spanish, and Italian. No one could understand me, and after about 2 hours they went away. I sat outside the church watching some soldiers. Suddenly I felt an arrow near my eye. A group of 6 little men fired more arrows at me. The soldiers were angry with the little men. I picked up the 6 men and put 5 of them in my pocket. I put the other man near my mouth. Now the soldiers were worried. I put the little man down. and he ran away. "I don't eat little men," I said, smiling. One by one, I took the other little men out of my pocket, and they all ran away. The soldiers were all very happy indeed. The little people began to trust me. After about 2 weeks, 600 beds arrived at my new house. The little men put them all together to make one big bed. After that, I was very comfortable. Everybody in Lilliput now knew about me. Rich people, lazy people, and curious people all came to see me. The emperor often came to see me too. He also talked to all the important people in the land. Some people were worried. My food was very expensive and I was dangerous. They wanted to kill me. The emperor said no. He remembered the 6 little men who fired arrows. "Find me the best teachers," he said. "This man must learn our language." After about 3 weeks, I could speak the language quite well. The emperor sometimes came to give me conversation practice. Every time he came, I asked him for my freedom. "Be patient," he always said. I was now very comfortable with my bed, the language, and some new clothes. When the men brought me my new clothes, they made a list of all my things. Later that day, the emperor came to visit. He had thousands of soldiers with him. "I want to take your sword," he said. I took out my sword slowly. The sunlight caught the sword. The light hurt the soldiers' eyes, and they were all afraid. I put the sword on the ground, and hundreds of soldiers took it away. After that, I gave my other things to the emperor: my money, my comb, and my notebook. The soldiers took them all away. I was lucky. When they made the list of my things, they didn't find my secret pocket. In that pocket were my glasses and a pocket telescope. I didn't tell the emperor about them. I wanted to keep them for myself. Chapter 2. My Life in Lilliput. Lilliput. Freedom. War with Blefuscu. Escape to Blefuscu. I returned to England. People in Lilliput seemed more friendly now. Boys and girls played in my hair and they called me Man Mountain. The horses weren't scared of me now. People enjoyed coming to see me. I was now a tourist attraction. One day, the emperor asked me to stand up with my feet apart. He then told his soldiers to march under me. Everyone enjoyed the parade. "Now I'll give you your freedom," the emperor said. "But there are some rules, so there are 9 rules. If you agree, you'll be free." The emperor gave me a piece of paper. Rules 1. The Man Mountain must not leave Lilliput without permission. 2. He must not come into the city without permission. 3. He must stay on the roads. 4. He must be careful, our people are very small. 5. He must carry urgent messages for the emperor. 6. He must help us in our war with Blefuscu. 7. He must help us build new houses. 8. He must make a map of our country. 9. He can have food and drink, = to 1,724 Lilliputians. I had no problem with the rules. I asked a friend about how they decided how much food and drink to give me. "The best mathematicians in the country decided this," he said. "They thought about your height. You're exactly 12 times taller than us. Your volume is therefore 123. As you know, 123 = 1,000 1724. I checked the mathematics. 12x 12x 12 equals 1724. You're very clever people, I answered, and very good at economics. About 2 weeks later, I had a visitor. His name was Reldresal, and he was an important man. He sat in my hand and we talked. He told me about some of the problems in Lilliput. He was worried about political differences. He was also worried about war with Blefuscu. The biggest problem, he said, is eggs. Eggs? I asked, surprised. Yes, eggs. Big Endians and little Endians. I was confused. What are big Endians and little Endians? Everyone in Lilliput has boiled eggs for breakfast. In the past, everyone cut their boiled egg at the big end. They were big Endians. Then, an emperor cut his finger. He made a law. Everyone had to cut their boiled egg at the little end. We became little Endians. Some people changed, but other people didn't. There were protests. Some big Endians left Lilliput. Today there are still problems. The Emperor of Blefuscu helps the big Endians, so we're at war with Blefuscu about eggs. Can I help? I asked. I hope so, answered Reldresal sadly. The Emperor of Blefuscu has a lot of ships. He has more than us, and the ships are ready to attack us. Let me speak to the Emperor, I said. I had an idea. The Empire of Blefuscu is very near to Lilliput. The channel between the two countries is less than a mile wide, and the water isn't very deep. Before I went to see the Emperor, I went to the beach. I looked at the Blefuscu ships through my pocket telescope. There were about 50 ships. I went quickly to the palace. I told the Emperor my idea and he was very happy indeed. I went home to prepare some small ropes. The next morning, I went to the shore. I took off my coat and my shoes and swam across the channel. When I got near to the Emperor of Blefuscu's ships, his soldiers were scared. Some of them jumped into the water. Some of them fired arrows at me, and I was worried about my eyes. Then I remembered my glasses and put them on. My job was very easy. I put ropes on all the Emperor of Blefuscu's ships. Then I pulled them across the channel to Lilliput. The Emperor of Lilliput was very happy. He gave me a special reward. I was a Nardak, like a lord, dear reader. The Emperor was so happy that he decided to send me to Blefuscu again. You can kill all the big Endians, he said. Everyone will cut their eggs from the little end. Everyone in the world. I'll be Emperor of the whole world. No, that's not right, I shouted. I can't help you. I don't want to kill people. I don't want to kill people because of eggs. The Emperor was surprised, and then he was angry. Don't trust the Emperor, my friend said later that evening. Some of the Emperor's friends are angry with you. You're a Nardak, and they want to be Nardaks. They'll say bad things about you. The Emperor will change. I'll be very careful. You can't always trust emperors, I said. A few weeks later, the most important Blefuscans came to Lilliput. We must end the war, they said to the Emperor. We don't want to fight anymore. It's time for us to be friends. The Emperor of Lilliput said yes. The Emperor of Blefuscu had to pay a lot of money, but the war was over. There was a big dinner to celebrate the end of the war. At the dinner, I met the Emperor of Blefuscu. I liked him, and I talked to him for a long time. I was lucky he was very important to me later. Now that I was a Nardak, life was different. I didn't build houses now. I had time to learn more about Lilliput. I talked to a lot of people and I learned to write Lilliputian. This was very difficult. Lilliputian writing isn't from left to right like Europeans. It isn't from right to left like Arabic writers. It's diagonal, from one corner of the paper to the other. There are many other differences. For example, Lilliputians believe that the earth is flat. They also have some very strict laws. I lived very well in Lilliput. I had 300 cooks, 20 waiters, and lots of other servants. People began to talk. They said I was very expensive. Many of the emperor's friends were angry with me. They began to talk to the emperor. My friend was right. The emperor of Lilliput began to change. He didn't want to fight for us, one said. He talked to the emperor of Blefuscu, said another. He wants to live in Blefuscu, said a third man. Oh no, you're right, said the emperor. He'll fight against us. We must kill him. Later that night, my good friend came to see me. You must leave Lilliput, he said. I know, I answered. It's too dangerous for me here. We made a plan. That night I said goodbye to my Lilliputian friend. I swam to Blefuscu. I took a ship and put my things in it. I pulled the ship across the channel with me. The people of Blefuscu were very pleased to see me. They sent a message to the Emperor of Blefuscu. Almost immediately, the Emperor and his wife arrived at the shore. The people of Blefuscu were not scared of me. The Emperor was very kind to me, but there was one problem. There was no house for me in Blefuscu, so I slept outside. 3 days later I went for a walk. I went to the northeast of the island. I saw something in the sea. Was it a boat? I took off my coat and shoes and swam to it. It was a boat, an empty boat, and it was my size. I swam back to the shore and went immediately to the city. I asked for a meeting with the Emperor. He was happy to see me. Your Majesty, I began, I need your help. I'll help you if I can, he answered. Thank you, Your Majesty. I need 20 ships and 3,000 men. The Emperor was surprised. Why? There's a big boat in the sea in the northeast. I need your help to bring it here. I can use the boat to return to my country. The Emperor was very kind. He gave me the ships and the men. We brought the boat back to Blefuscu. Before I left, the Emperor got a letter from Lilliput. The Emperor of Lilliput was very, very angry. Send the Man Mountain back to Lilliput, he wrote. The Emperor of Blefuscu sent a letter back. I'm very sorry, he wrote, but I can't send him back to you. The Man Mountain is very kind. He is a peaceful man. He stopped the war between us. The Emperor showed me his letter. He asked me to stay in Blefuscu. I'll protect you, he said. No, I must leave, I answered. The Emperor helped me. He gave me food and drink for the journey. He also gave me some money. I took some of the little animals with me to show people at home. I wanted to take some of the little men with me too, but the Emperor said no. On the 24th of September, 1701, at 6 in the morning, I left Blefuscu. My journey was very comfortable. The first day the weather was good. I stopped near a small island and slept for a few hours. The next day was the same. On the third day, at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I saw a ship. To my surprise, the ship was English. I reached the ship about 2 hours later. The captain was a very kind man. "Where are you going?" I asked. "England," he answered. "We are returning from Japan." Everyone on the ship was curious about my story. They didn't believe that the people on Lilliput were so small. "You're mad," they said. "Let me show you something," I answered. I showed them my little animals. Now they believed me. The journey was very comfortable, and we soon arrived home. I made a lot of money with my little animals. I took them to markets in London and I showed them to people. People paid a lot to see them. Then someone bought them for £100. Now I was rich. I stayed with my wife and family, and I bought a new house. But I didn't want to stay in England. I wanted to travel. I gave my wife £1,500. I said goodbye to her, my son, and my daughter. We were all very sad. I left England again. The name of my ship was the Adventure. I'll tell you all about my adventures on the Adventure in the next chapter. Chapter 3. My journey to Brobdingnag. I go back to sea. I arrive at the land of giants. I become a tourist attraction. I live with the king and queen. On the 20th of June, 1702, I left England on the Adventure. We had a very good journey south and stopped for the winter at the Cape of Good Hope. In the spring we sailed again. We saw Madagascar and sailed towards the Molucca Islands. The weather was very good. Too good. Captain Nicholas was a very good sailor. He understood weather. "There will be a terrible storm tomorrow, a monsoon," he said one day. He was right. It was stormy for many days. No one knew where we were. We had lots of food, but we didn't have much water. We started to look for land. On the 16th of June, 1703, we saw land. Some of us got into a small boat and went towards the shore. When we arrived, we started to look for water. Some of us went left and others went right. I didn't see any people and I didn't find any water. I was tired, so I started to go back to the boat. When I got back to the shore, I couldn't see the boat. Then I saw it, at sea, moving quickly. Behind it, there was a very tall man, a giant. He tried but couldn't catch the boat. I ran away. I ran for miles. I arrived at a field. The field was full of wheat, but it was very, very tall. Suddenly, another giant man appeared, then another, then a woman. There were 7 of them. What are they doing? I thought. They're farmers. Oh no, they're cutting the wheat. I ran and ran, but the farmers came nearer. I stopped, very tired. My wife, I thought. My poor wife and my poor children. Why did I leave England? I don't want to die here. I thought about Lilliput and the little people. They were scared of me. Now I was scared of someone much bigger than me. At that very moment, I saw a foot. "No, help! Stop!" I shouted loudly. The farmer stopped. He looked at the ground in front of him. Then he saw me. He looked at me for a while. I understood his thoughts. I look like this when I see a strange animal. Will it hurt me? I think. After a while he picked me up, carefully. He held me between his thumb and a finger. I was scared. I was very high in the air. "Don't drop me," I shouted. "Ouch! You're hurting me." He seemed to understand. The farmer put me into his pocket. He walked towards his friends. "Look at this," I think he said. I didn't understand the language, but I could guess. The farmer put me on the ground. His friends sat down in a circle. They watched me. I tried to talk to them. I tried many different languages. They couldn't really hear me and they couldn't understand. The farmers tried to talk to me, but the noise was very loud. It hurt my ears. After a while, the farmer carried me to his house. He was very careful. He called his wife. She was scared and ran away. She came back after a minute or two and was very kind to me. It was lunchtime and she put a very big plate onto the table. The family came to eat. They were very curious. In total, there were the farmer and his wife, their 3 children, and an old grandmother. The farmer's wife gave me some food and drink. Suddenly, a giant cat jumped up to sit on the wife's knees. I was scared for a moment, but I think the cat was more afraid of me. After lunch, the nurse came into the room with the farmer's enormous baby. This was a terrible moment. The baby saw me and immediately picked me up. He put me into his mouth. I was very lucky. The farmer's wife pulled my legs, and I was free. Then the farmer's wife took me upstairs and put me into a bedroom. She locked the door. I slept for about 2 hours. When I woke up, I looked around the room. Then I saw them. 2 enormous rats. They wanted to eat me. I took out my sword and killed the first one. The second ran away. The farmer's wife came in at that moment and saved me. I liked the farmer's daughter very much. She was 9 years old and about 40 feet tall. She made a little bed for me. She also made 7 little shirts for me. She was my teacher too. Very quickly, I began to understand their language. She called me Grildrig, little man. Everyone in the family then called me Grildrig. Soon, everyone in the country called me Grildrig. Her name was Glumdalclitch, and she was very, very kind to me. Glumdalclitch stayed with me all the time I was in Brobdingnag. Everyone in the village knew about me. I was a strange animal, just like a human, but very small. When visitors came to the house, the farmer put me on the table. I spoke to the people in their language. One visitor said to the farmer, "Put him in a box and take him to the market. People will pay to see him," he said. Glumdalclitch was afraid. "Don't hurt him," she said. The next day the farmer put me in a box to take me to the market. Glumdalclitch came with us. The journey was uncomfortable in my little box. When we arrived at the village, the farmer found a room at a hotel. He brought people to see me. Glumdalclitch asked me questions and I answered in their language. A schoolboy threw a peanut at me. It didn't hit me. I was very lucky. The farmer was very happy. He decided to take me to all the markets in Brobdingnag. Travelling was very difficult for me and very uncomfortable. I became ill. The farmer wasn't worried. Someone must buy him before he dies, he thought. Luckily, a message came from the Queen. She wanted to see me immediately, so we went to the palace. She was very kind. "Where are you from?" she asked. "England," I answered. "And why did you come to Brobdingnag?" I told her about my travels. The Queen was very interested. She decided to buy me. "How much must I give you?" she asked the farmer. 1,000 gold pieces, he answered. "Your Majesty," I said. "Yes, Grildrig. I have one question. Can Glumdalclitch come too? She's my nurse and my teacher." Glumdalclitch was happy, the Queen was happy, and the farmer was happy. He was rich and his daughter lived in the royal palace. One day the Queen took me to see her husband, the king. He was surprised. "Is that your new pet?" he asked. "What is it?" "He's not an animal," she answered. "Listen." The Queen asked me some questions, and I answered in her language. The king was interested in my story too. He called Glumdalclitch. "Is his story true?" he asked. "Yes," she answered. At first the king wasn't sure. Perhaps I was a clockwork toy. So he called the 3 most intelligent people in Brobdingnag. They looked at me and they talked to me. "He isn't an animal, he isn't fast, and he can't climb trees," one said. "He isn't a man," said another. "He's too small." "He's a freak of nature," they all said. "Your Majesty," I shouted, "I'm a man. I come from a country called England. In England, there are millions of men and women like me. In my country, the trees and the animals are in proportion to us." The 3 intelligent people laughed at me. The king was a fair man. He was still interested in my story. "Look after him," he said to the Queen. "Give him food. Build a house for him. I like him." The Queen called a carpenter. "Make a beautiful house for this man," she said. The carpenter was very clever. He made a very comfortable box for me. It had windows, a bed, chairs, a table and a wardrobe. It was perfect for travelling and for living. The Queen liked me. I always had dinner with her. She found toy silver plates, knives and forks for me, and she cut my food for me. Every Wednesday, Wednesdays were holidays, the King and Queen had lunch together. The King liked talking to me. He talked about my country and Europe. He asked about government, laws, religion and education. Sometimes he laughed, but he always listened. Sometimes life in Brobdingnag was dangerous for a little man. One day I opened my window and there were 20 giant wasps outside. Luckily, I had my sword. They attacked me, so I killed them all, one by one. I kept some wasp stings as souvenirs. I had problems with giant flies too. I often travelled with the King and Queen. Brobdingnag was a very big country. European map makers are very bad. They think there is no big country between Japan and California. When I return to England, I'll correct their maps, I thought. The mountains in the north of Brobdingnag are 30 miles high. People catch fish in the rivers, not in the sea. Why? Because the fish in the sea are too small. In fact, they're just like ours in England. There are 51 cities in Brobdingnag and lots of villages. The cities are very beautiful, and there are a lot of royal palaces and temples. The king began to trust me. He often asked questions about England. "We have 2 islands, and we have some land in another country, America," I said. "We have a king and a parliament. Parliament has 2 houses, the House of Lords and the House of Commons. We also have judges. We pay tax to the government. We have very good soldiers and very good sailors." "Why do you need soldiers?" he asked. "Soldiers are very expensive. Farmers are better for the country." "We're a very powerful country," I said. "We have very good guns. We can kill a lot of people in a very short time. So we stay powerful. I can help you make guns like ours." The king was very angry. "No," he shouted. "I love science and I love art. My people study mathematics, philosophy, history and poetry. I think you're horrible people. You make war on other countries for power? I don't make war on other countries. I don't need big guns to kill other people. I need farmers to grow food for them." We didn't speak about England again. Chapter 4. I travel to Laputa. I leave Brobdingnag. I return to England. I meet pirates. I visit the flying island of Laputa. After 2 years in Brobdingnag, I began to think about my freedom. It seemed impossible. Everyone was so big and I was so small. At the beginning of the 3rd year, the king and queen decided to travel to the south coast. They wanted to visit their people there. I travelled with them, in my now very comfortable box. Glumdalclitch came too. At the end of our journey to the south, Glumdalclitch and I were very tired. I had a cold and Glumdalclitch was very ill. I wanted to go outside, but Glumdalclitch wanted to sleep. She called a boy. "Take Grildrig to the sea," she said. "I don't feel very well, so I'll stay here. Be very careful. Look after Grildrig well." Glumdalclitch was very sad. Perhaps she could see into the future. The boy carried me in my box down to the sea. It took about half an hour. I was very tired and I fell asleep. I don't really know what happened next. Perhaps the boy went swimming. Perhaps he put the box down just for a minute, but suddenly I woke up. "What's this? Why is the box moving so fast?" I thought. I was scared. I looked out of my window. I could see the sky and clouds. I was now very high in the sky. I was in the claws of a giant bird. "It knows I'm in here. It'll eat me," I thought, afraid. "Help!" I shouted out of the window. "Help!" Suddenly the box began to fall. It fell down and down. With a splash, it fell into the sea. In the water, in the box, I thought about poor Glumdalclitch. I thought about the king and queen. "Please don't be angry with Glumdalclitch," I said to myself. Then I thought, will someone rescue me? Will I die in the water here? After about 4 scary hours, I heard a noise. It was a ship. "Help! Help!" I shouted. "Who's there?" a man asked in English. "Lemuel Gulliver," I shouted. "Help me, please." The ship's carpenter cut the box open and I walked out. The sailors were very surprised. They seemed small to me. Was I back in Lilliput? No, they were the same size as me. The destination of the ship was England. On the journey, I spent a lot of time with the captain. I told him about Brobdingnag. He didn't believe me. "You're mad," he said. Luckily, I had the wasp sting and some other souvenirs of Brobdingnag. When he saw them, he believed my story. "Write a book about it," he said. "Perhaps I will," I answered. I arrived home on the 3rd of June, 1703, about 9 months later. My wife was very happy to see me. My wife and my daughter seemed very small to me. "You'll never go to sea again," she said. She was wrong. 10 days later, a man came to my house. His name was William Robinson, and he was the captain of the Hopewell. He was like a brother to me. He came to visit me often. One day he said, "I want to go to India. Will you come with me? I need a good ship's doctor." "Yes," I said, "I'll be very happy to come with you." On the 5th of August, 1706, we left England again. In April the next year, we arrived in Madras. We stayed there for a few weeks because some sailors were ill. When we set off again, there was a terrible storm. We didn't know where we were. On the 10th day, pirates saw our ship. Some of the pirates were Dutch and some were Japanese. I spoke Dutch quite well, so I said, "Please take the ship, but don't kill us." The Japanese pirate was angry. "Put him in a canoe alone," he said. "Let him die at sea." The pirates took our sailors onto their ship. They put me into a canoe. I was alone at sea again. When I was a long way from the pirate ship, I took out my pocket telescope. Through it, I saw some small islands. I sailed towards the first island, but it was very rocky. I found some eggs, ate them, and slept under a rock. The next day I sailed to another island, then another. On the 5th day, I arrived at the last island. I found some more eggs. On this island, there was a small cave. I slept a little. I was quite worried now. I was very tired. "Will I die here?" I thought. When I left the cave, it was quite late the next morning. The sun was hot and the sky was clear. Suddenly, it went quite dark. I looked up. There was a large cloud in the sky. But no, it wasn't a cloud. What was it? It started to come down. I took out my pocket telescope. I could see people on it. It was a very big island in the sky. I was happy to see people, so I waved and waved. Some people on the island saw me. The island came down more. More people on the island in the sky came to look. They waved at me. The island was now very near to me. "Help me! Help me!" I shouted. The next minute, I saw a seat on a rope. The seat came down from the island towards me. I sat on the seat, and the people on the island pulled me up. On the island in the sky, I saw some very strange people. Their eyes looked in different directions. Their clothes had a lot of drawings on them, suns, moons, stars, and musical instruments. They seemed very distracted. Their servants told them when to speak and when to listen. The people on the island were very kind. They took me to the royal palace immediately. The king was also very kind. He sat on a chair in the middle of the room. There were mathematical instruments all around him. He asked me some questions, but of course I didn't understand his language. Then dinner arrived. The food was very strange. The lamb was triangular, The bread was conical, and the sausages looked like musical instruments. A group of musicians played some music. I didn't like the music at all. It was terrible. After dinner, the king sent me away with a man. He had pens and paper. He was my language teacher. He taught me the names of the shapes, the moon and stars, and all the musical instruments. After a few days, I began to understand the language. The name of the island in the sky is Laputa. Laputa flies over a larger island under it. The name of this island is Balnibarbi. The capital city, Lagado, is on Balnibarbi. The houses on Laputa are all very strange. There are no 90 degrees angles in the houses. This is because the Laputans aren't practical. They're interested in mathematics, music, and astrology. The men of Laputa are also very scared. They're afraid that one day a falling star will hit their island. The women of Laputa live a comfortable life, but they're very bored. The king uses physics to control the movement of Laputa. He also uses Laputa to control the people of Balnibarbi. Dear reader, the people of Balnibarbi are very oppressed. The king can use Laputa to stop rain and block the sun. If the people of Balnibarbi cause a lot of trouble, the people of Laputa throw rocks at them. The people on the island of Laputa were kind to me, but they weren't curious about me at all. I was quite interested in both mathematics and music, but the men were quite boring. I began to talk to the women, children, and servants. The Laputan men were surprised at this, but the women, children, and servants talked about more interesting things than the men. I studied hard, and now I could speak their language very well. But there was nothing for me here. After 2 months on the island, I wanted to leave. There was one Laputan man I liked. He was a very important lord. He was very intelligent, very practical, and very interested in the world around him. Everyone said he was stupid. Why? Because he didn't like Laputan music. He often came to talk to me in my room. What's Europe like? What laws are there in England? What's Lilliput like? What's Brobdingnag like? He asked. One day, we talked about travelling. Could you help me? I asked him. How? He answered. Will you talk to the king for me? I want to leave. I want to travel to Balnibarbi and to other places in the world. Yes, I'll talk to the king, he said. On the 16th of February, I left Laputa. The king gave me a present, some money to help me on Balnibarbi. The island of Laputa went down in the sky. When we were near Balnibarbi, I went down on the seat on the rope. Chapter 5. I visit strange and wonderful places on Balnibarbi. Inside the academy, the magical island. I meet Hannibal. When I reached Balnibarbi, I was very happy. I walked to Lagado. I'm sure you remember that this is the capital city. I had the name of a man to visit in Lagado, Lord Munodi. He was a friend of my friend on Laputa. The man was very happy to meet me. I stayed in his house. The next morning, he took me to visit the capital. It was about the same size as London. The houses were very strange and very badly built. The people in the streets walked fast. They looked a little wild. Their clothes were old. Then we walked into the countryside. Again the people were poor. I was surprised because the land was good. Lord Munodi's house was different from the others. His garden was also more beautiful than the others. I asked Lord Munodi why. About 40 years ago, the Laputan government built an academy here in Lagado. The academy studies building, agriculture and languages. The professors have some very strange ideas. They tell the Laputan government their ideas and the government makes stupid laws. They aren't practical. My house is different, because I break the laws. Can I visit the academy? I asked. Yes, but you must go alone, he answered. I hate the academy and I'll never ever go there. You must take some money with you. They never have any money for their studies, so they beg from visitors. The following day I visited the academy. The dean was very happy to meet me. The academy was very big, with about 500 rooms. In the first room, there was an old man. He told me about his studies. I'm working on a very important project. I'm trying to make sunlight from cucumbers. We take the sunlight out of the cucumbers, put it in a bottle, and then we can use it on cold days. Very interesting, I said. I gave him some money. I went into another room. The smell was so bad that I left immediately. In another room, there was a very clever engineer. He had a new way of building houses. He built the roof first and the walls second. At the end, he built the foundations. In the next room, there was a man who couldn't see. His job was to mix colours for artists. He did this by smell and by touch. I visited a lot of rooms in the academy, but I didn't see any practical ideas. The dean wanted to show me more rooms on the other side of the academy. There, I visited the School of Languages. There were 3 professors there. Their job was to improve their language. What exactly are you doing? I asked one professor. This is my language machine, he answered. It's making our words shorter. All words will soon be very, very short. Very interesting, I said. My job is more interesting, said the second professor. There's no need for words in our language. Speaking is very bad for people. Too much speaking makes people ill. In my system, we don't need words. We need things. People will soon communicate by carrying things in their pockets. For short conversations, you only need a few things. Of course, for long conversations, you need servants to carry your things. For very long conversations, you need a cart. My system has one great advantage. It's a universal language. You can communicate with people from all over the world. But my language machine is the best, said the first professor. No, yours is too complicated, said the second. I gave them some money and left quickly. Next, I spent a very short time at the School of Mathematics. There the scientists wrote formulas on edible paper. They then ate them, immediately. I now understood that all these professors were mad. Balnibarbi was poor and unhappy because of these professors and their silly ideas. I decided to leave the academy in Balnibarbi as soon as possible. I wanted to go back to Europe. The next day I spoke to Lord Munodi. I want to go back to England, I said. I'm not surprised, he answered. Perhaps I can help. The King of Lugnag is a good friend of the Emperor of Japan. It must be possible to get from there to Japan and from Japan to England. Why don't you go to Lugnag? It's a small island and it's quite near." "Thank you," I said. "That's a very good idea." I said goodbye to Lord Minodi and left Legado. I travelled to the port of Maldonado. When I arrived, I spoke to a man at the port. "When's the next ship for Lugnaag?" I asked. "In 5 weeks," he answered. I decided to spend the time visiting a different island, Glubdubdrib. Its other name is the Magical Island. It's a very small island. The king of the Magical Island is a magician. He has a very special power. He can call ghosts from the past to be his servants. They can only work for him for 24 hours. When I arrived at the Magical Island, I went immediately to see the king. He was very happy to see me and invited me to stay in the royal palace. It was a little strange at first. The servants were always different. One evening, the king invited me to a special dinner. After dinner, we talked. "I like you, Gulliver," he said. "I have an interesting idea. Do you want to meet some people from the past?" "Yes, please," I answered. "Who?" "Let me think." "Alexander the Great," I answered. "Call him. Then he'll appear," said the king. "Alexander the Great," I called. 2 seconds later, Alexander appeared. It was difficult to understand his Greek at first. "Another," said the king. Soon Hannibal appeared. "Look, he's crossing the Alps," I shouted. I then asked to see Caesar and Pompey. Then the whole Senate of Rome appeared. Caesar and Brutus came near to me. I spoke to Brutus, a very fine man. The next day, I decided to call some more ghosts. Homer and Aristotle were interesting. I called Descartes and Gassendi. Aristotle was pleased to meet them. "Oh dear, I made some mistakes in my philosophy," he said after a long conversation. The next day I called some ghosts from modern history. They were very disappointing. I called people from the past and recent past. It was strange. All the people from the recent past were very disappointing. At the end of my stay on the Magical Island, I understood more about the problems of my country and the problems of Europe. It was time for me to leave. I thanked the king of the Magical Island very much and went back to Maldonado. There I found a ship for Lugnaag. The journey took a month. It's easy to communicate with the people of Lugnaag because many of them speak the language of Balnibarbi. The Lugnaagians are very polite, kind people. They all seem to be very happy. Soon after I arrived, the king invited me to the royal palace. I wanted to be polite too, so I learned some words in Lugnaagian. When I arrived at the palace, I said these words to the king. Ik bling glofthrob, skutserum, bliop mlashnalt, zwin, modbalkuf, sliopad, gurdlub, asht. He was very pleased. He invited me to stay in the royal palace. I stayed for 3 months. One day, a Lugnaagian asked me a strange question. Would you like to meet an immortal? What do you mean? Some people here are immortal. They live forever. How wonderful, I said. Yes, I'd like to learn from an immortal. They'll teach me a lot about life. Perhaps I can learn something special. Unfortunately, the immortals aren't nice people. They're angry, horrible, jealous, miserable, and talk a lot. because they're different from other people. They don't have friends. They're also very ugly. They've a strange blue spot on their heads. The oldest immortal I met was 200 years old. He was very, very angry and very, very horrible. I began to understand that the Lugnagians don't like the immortals. They don't want to live forever. Perhaps that's why the Lugnagians are so happy. After 3 months at the royal palace, I decided to leave. It was time to go back to England and my family. The king was sorry. "Stay here," he said. "You can work for my government." "I'm sorry," I answered. "I must go home. I must see my family again." The king was very kind. He gave me some gold and a beautiful red diamond. In early May, I left Lugnag. I arrived in Japan 2 weeks later. In Japan, I began to look for a ship to take me to Europe. It was very difficult to find a ship. After a few weeks, I found a Dutch ship. I spoke to the captain. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Holland," I answered. The Dutch and the English weren't good friends at this time. It was better to be Dutch. Luckily, I knew the Dutch language very well. Captain Theodorus van Grult was happy to take me. He needed a ship's doctor. I invented some stories about my family in Gelderland. No one knew I was English. In June, we finally left Japan. The journey was long, but there were no adventures. We stopped at the Cape of Good Hope. This time we only stayed for 2 days because the weather was good. We got fresh water and sailed away immediately. On the 6th of April 1710, we arrived at Amsterdam. I immediately found another boat from Amsterdam to England. 4 days later, I was home. My wife was very happy to see me. She was very well, and so were my children. I stayed at home in England for 5 very happy months. Then I started to think about travelling again. I spoke to some friends. "Didn't you sail on the Adventure a few years ago?" one of them said. "Yes. Why?" "Well, they need a new captain. Why don't you speak to the owner?" I travelled to Portsmouth to meet the owner of the Adventure. After many years as a ship's doctor, I understood navigation very well. It was time for me to become the captain of a ship. The owner was happy he remembered me from before. "The job is yours," he said. I was very pleased. Now I needed a ship's doctor. I found a young man. He was very good at his job. Then I said goodbye to my wife and children. We left Portsmouth on the 7th of September, 1710. Our destination? The South Seas. Again. Chapter 6. In the land of the Houyhnhnms, pirates attack me. I meet some Yahoos. I live with the Houyhnhnms. I return to England. My journey to the South Seas as captain wasn't very good. Some of my men died on the way to the West Indies. I stopped at Barbados and the Leeward Islands. We needed some more men. I made a bad choice. Some of the new men were pirates. There were 50 men on my ship. The pirates talked to my men. "We can take the ship and kill the captain," they said. "We can make a lot of money for ourselves," my men thought. "I don't want to kill the captain," one man said. "He's not a bad man." But I agree. Let's take the ship. One morning, 20 of the men came into my room with guns. Now, I wasn't the captain, I was a prisoner on my ship. They gave me food and drink, but I had to stay in my room. I stayed in my room for weeks and weeks. The pirates took the ship past Madagascar. One day the pirates put me into a boat. They took me to the shore and left me. Where was I? I had no idea. I sat on the beach. I had some money and some gold in my pockets, but no food or water. I tried to think. I must find some people, I decided. I got up and walked away from the shore. After a while I saw a line of trees. Through the trees I could see some animals. They were very ugly indeed. They were very hairy, and some of them had long beards. They could walk on 2 legs, but they were like monkeys. Some had yellow hair, others had red hair, and others had black hair. They were almost human, but I didn't like them at all. I hated them as soon as I saw them. I didn't know why. Then the animals saw me. One of them came up to me. I was scared, so I took out my sword. The animal shouted, and about 40 others ran to help him. They threw things at me. Suddenly, the animals all ran away. I turned round to see why. There was a grey horse walking into the field. The animals were afraid of the horse. The horse was a little surprised when he saw me. He looked at me and walked around me. We looked at each other for a while. I put my hand on his neck. The horse didn't like this. He pushed my hand away with his leg. He made a strange noise and a brown horse appeared. The 2 horses both made noises. They're speaking to each other, I thought. The 2 horses looked at me again. They looked at my coat and hat. In their language they said a word, Yahoo. They repeated this word 3 or 4 times. I was a little scared, but communication is important. Yahoo, I said back to the horses. They were surprised. Hoin, said the brown horse. Hoin, I repeated. The horses talked together for a while. Then the brown horse left. The grey horse pointed at the road with his hoof. He wants me to go with him, I thought. I walked onto the road and the horse followed me. We walked for about 3 miles. Then we arrived at a big building. Good, I thought. I'll meet the horse's owner. I was wrong. Inside there were other horses. One was very young and one was its mother. Yahoo, said the mother when she saw me. I was confused. The grey horse understood. He took me outside. There in a field was an animal. He pointed at the animal with his hoof and said, Yahoo! The Yahoo was just like the animals on the road. This horse thinks I'm a Yahoo, I thought. I'm quite similar to one, except they are very dirty. They have no clothes. They are very hairy. I have nice clothes, and I am clean, but I look a little like a Yahoo. I have feet like a Yahoo, except I'm wearing shoes. The grey horse looked at me and looked at the Yahoo. He seemed pleased and said something to another horse. That horse brought me some food. It was disgusting. I couldn't eat it, so the horse threw it to the Yahoo. The Yahoo ate it greedily. The horses were kind. They wanted to give me food, so they brought me some of their food. It was too dry. Luckily, they brought some milk, and I was happy. That night, I slept well. I didn't sleep in the field with the Yahoos, and I didn't sleep in the building with the horses. I slept between the 2. The grey horse was my owner. He wanted to teach me his language. He wanted to understand more about me. Every day the grey horse and a little brown horse gave me lessons. I wrote words down to help me remember them. The horses didn't understand. They had no books and they couldn't write. After about 10 weeks they were surprised, but I could understand their language. The word hoinm in their language means horse, and it also means perfect. One day my owner asked me some questions. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "Another country across the sea." "No, you're wrong," said the horse. "There are no countries across the sea." He asked more questions. "Do you have yahoos in your country?" "Yes," I answered. "They're the rulers of our country. They're called people. They're different from your yahoos because they're clean. They wear clothes and they can write." "And do you have hoims in your country?" "Yes. They're called horses. They work in the fields. People look after them. Sometimes people sit on their backs." The grey horse was angry. "It's different here," I said. "Here the yahoos work in the fields. Their horses work in the fields. I talk to the grey horse every day." He began to understand about my country, but he didn't understand the concept of war. "Why do you have wars?" he asked. "For a lot of different reasons," I answered. "How do you fight? Yahoos aren't strong." "We have guns and swords." "This is terrible," he said. "Europeans are more vicious than yahoos." The horse was also sad when I told him about our strict laws, because they don't need laws in the land of the Houyhnhnms. He didn't like our money system. There are no rich people and no poor people there. He was shocked when I talked to him about the diseases we have in Europe. I learned a lot about Houyhnhnm culture. I was happy and healthy living there. They're very peaceful. Houyhnhnms like to be friendly and kind. They have no negative words in their language except for Yahoo. Education is very important to them. They teach their children to be clean and to work hard. Physical activity is very important to them. They must be strong and fast. Young Houyhnhnms run up and down hills. Every 3 months, there's a competition of running and jumping. Houyhnhnms don't write, but they like poetry. They know a little about astronomy. They're never ill. For small accidents, they have very good natural medicines. The government of their country is very important. Every 4 years, there's a great council. The senior Houyhnhnms all go to the council. It lasts for 6 days. There they make important decisions about food, yahoos, and family. I stayed in the land of the Houyhnhnms for a long time. One year, there was a great council. My owner was the member of the council for our area. He told me all about it when he came back. We had one important debate about the yahoos. Some Houyhnhnms want to kill the yahoos. "Why?" I asked. "Houyhnhnms are peaceful. You don't kill animals." "No, but they're noisy, dirty and dangerous. You're different from all the other yahoos. You're intelligent. You've your own language, and you also speak ours. You're clean." "Thank you," I said. The grey horse didn't tell me everything about the council. Later I understood more. I was happy. I loved my life with the Houyhnhnms. I began to walk a little like them. I spoke only their language. I had a small house. I made a bed, table and chairs for myself. I made clothes for myself. My food was very simple and very good. I made bread, and I found honey in the forest. I had no problems. Here there were no criminals, no politicians, no stupid people except yahoos. Sometimes I went to dinner with the Hoynsons. We talked about love, nature, traditions and poetry. Sometimes I thought about England, my family and the people I knew in Europe. Yahoos, I thought. They're all yahoos. One morning, the grey horse came to see me. He was sad. "You must leave us," he said. "You must return to your country and leave the land of the Houyhnhnms." "No," I cried, "I am so happy here." "You must go. I didn't tell you everything about the Great Council. Members of the Council are very angry because you live with me. You live like a Houyhnhnm. You don't live with the yahoos. They're afraid of you." "Where can I go?" I said sadly. "You can't swim back to your own country. Can you build a boat?" "Yes," I answered. "I can build a boat. But I need time." "I understand. I'll tell the members of the council that you need 2 months." He was sorry. I was more than sorry. I made a boat from a tree. The little brown horse helped me. We made a sail. We made paddles. We prepared food and water for my journey. Finally, the day arrived. I had to leave the Houyhnhnms and my wonderful life. The family all came to the shore to say goodbye. Many other Houyhnhnms also came. "Goodbye," I said in tears. "Thank you. I'll never forget you." I kissed the grey horse's hoof. "Goodbye," said the grey horse. "Take care, good yahoo," said the little brown horse. I pushed my boat into the water and left the land of the Houyhnhnms. My desperate journey started early in the morning. The horses stayed on the shore. Sometimes I heard the little brown horse. "Take care, good yahoo." Finally, I couldn't see them anymore. I wanted to find a small deserted island. I was in the South Seas. There were many islands there. I didn't want to return to England. I stopped at one island, but the people fired arrows at me. One day, I saw a ship. I was afraid because I didn't want to meet any Europeans. I sailed to a small island. I put the boat behind a rock and waited. I was unlucky. The ship sent a small boat to the island to get water. They found me and my boat. The sailors were from Portugal. They saw I was European and they asked me lots of questions. "Where are you from?" "England. I'm a yahoo from England." They didn't understand the word yahoo. "Why are you here?" they said. I told them my story. The sailors were very kind. "Come back to the ship," they said. "Our captain will take you to Europe." "No, no," I cried. "He's mad, poor man," said one of the sailors. They took me to the ship. The captain of the ship was Pedro de Mendes. He was a very gentle man. He listened to my story. I was afraid of the sailors. They were dirty yahoos. He was quite clean. The journey to Lisbon was very comfortable. Pedro de Mendes was very patient with me. He helped me a lot. He took me to meet his wife and children in Lisbon, but he repeated one thing. "You must go back to England. You must go back to your wife and family." In December 1715, I finally arrived back in England. My wife and family were very happy to see me after so many years. At first, It was very difficult for me. They're yahoos, I thought. Dirty, horrible yahoos. Today, my relationship with my wife and children is much better, but I still have problems with some yahoos here. I bought 2 horses as soon as I got back. I speak to them for about 4 hours every day. They understand me quite well. They live in a nice building near mine. They're clean and beautiful. They're kind to me and friendly to each other. I love Hoytons.